So I have like multiple different realities. We kind of went like south, east, central, then north. So we started in like the South Bay in the Los Altos, Saratoga area. And then we moved east to like San Ramon, Danville, and then to the city in San Francisco and Pacific Heights, and then over to Marin.
Okay.
Yeah, so we kind of did like the four quadrants. Um, and where I grew up, where I would say like I grew up mainly is like the East Bay. I think that was like a lot of my formative years was
Hmm.
growing up in San Ramon, Danville area, which was like beautiful visually because it was like golden hills and oak trees. Um, but like aesthetically, architecturally, and I don't think I had those terms then. I
Sure.
didn't. I don't come from like a creative background or like a family that comes from like a creative background, but I knew it felt off. Like it was very homogenous,
Hmm.
both in like the architecture, and I don't even know if you can call that architecture. It's just like suburbia.
Hmm.
And it was like homogenous in ethnicity, homogenous in the way that like people think. And so it was, I don't know if I should be saying this about the East Bay. Oh my God. But
No.
I'm like,
Well,
I'm really telling you it was my experience as like a Persian gay boy,
Sure.
like growing up there. And like I was obviously like visually aware of things and like mentally aware of things too. But I like didn't have the words. I just knew that it was like not like the best place for me.
Hmm.
And not to say I was homecoming king for like 2 years. It wasn't that. It was just like it felt off.
mm,
Um, and then I was really lucky because my mom was a single mother, but she made it like a very important aspect of our lives was traveling.
Hmm.
So like we would go to like Cambodia and Thailand. We would go to Japan. We would go to amazing places in Mexico. We would go to France and Spain. And so Kenya, we would do
Wow.
like these amazing trips. And that really like going and like zooming out of the homogenous reality that I had and going into these places, I like, wow, there's really different ways people exist. Like there's really different ways how people function, how people communicate with each other. There's different ways people live in a home. There's different ways people like enjoy their time. And I think having that contrast, like seeing the contrast of my existence and then having like the contrast of traveling and seeing other places was really fantastic. And like made me be more visually aware and
Mm.
like aware of differences and unique qualities and things. And then when we moved to like Marin, that's when I really like fell in love with like the whole like Northern California experience
Hmm.
because it was like the architecture here, the homes were a little bit older and had kind of that mid-century feel. And like a lot of the homes were like open out to nature and
Hmm.
they had like views. Um, and like exploring like hiking in nature was really like a magical experience. And then going abroad it was something that I realized was very unique to Northern California, like the natural experiences we have here. And then with proximity to the city is like a
Hmm.
beautiful, beautiful experience we get to have here.
Hmm. Hmm. For people who are not familiar with Northern California, the places you mentioned, the four or the three kind of regions or cities you lived in, are pretty different from one another, especially Danville, San Ramon compared to Marin. Marin is as you
Yeah.
described. In Danville, I mean, I have some relatives
it's
that live out
pretty
there.
uniform out there.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, the in the larger sense, like the larger landscape outside of the neighborhoods is very nice. It's
Totally.
beautiful, but the neighborhoods themselves, at least the ones I've experienced, are classic suburban, cul-de-sacs, kind of cookie cutter houses. Not the most tastefully designed, I would say. Things like this.
Totally. You guys were going so hard on Danville. I'm like, they're gonna kill us. And it's like, but I think you're exactly right. Like, I remember when my mom got, like, it was that moment of history where it was like my mom got her, like, her first, like, home. And it was like you would go to a model home
Mm.
And like model homes, like for people who don't know, model homes are like in these tract suburban homes, which can be high end too.
Hmm.
You would go to these model homes and they would have like a fake interior designed home with like finishes. And I remember we walked through like the model homes and you pick which one you like. And then you like get a lot of land and they're building like a version of that house and you get to pick the finishes and the materials for that house.
Hmm.
And then you would go, and then when I like our house took like a year and a half to build, and then like we would go to like I would make friends with like the neighborhood boys and like I would go to their homes, which would be another version of my home
Interesting.
with different finishes that they selected. And so it was like this weird matrix. It was really weird. It was really a weird experience.
It's like, oh, we have the same bedroom, but yours is slightly different color.
Exactly. And also that made me aware too. I was like, oh, how funny. Like, oh, you chose to make your loft like this. And
uh,
like, oh, my mom chose to make her loft like this. And you guys chose to enclose your dining room. We chose to keep our dining room open. Like it
Hmm.
was like all these random things. It was very weird. I haven't thought about that ever. But yeah, that was a part of that experience.
I think it's really cool, actually. I mean, the I had sort of a similar experience actually because I grew up in a tract home that was kind of changed over time, and I lived in a cul-de-sac, so like a very suburban experience. And it wasn't until I was maybe like 10 or 8 years old, like being in life for a period of time, going to a neighbor's house down the street, and it never occurred to me that their house was the same exact one, but
Yeah,
situated on a different plot of land. So it always, and the outside looked different from a kid's perspective. Like when you're a kid, you can't tell that it's the same floor plan from the outside. Of course, now we can. And
totally.
I remember going inside, and as you said, like the Matrix, it was kind of a mind fuck. And I was like, this is
Yeah.
what's happening right now. Like what I have is not special, and what you're doing here is weird and perverse compared to what you grow up in. Like this is my home. Like why did you make it all wood or whatnot? It's a very strange thing.
Totally. And you experienced, you're from Southern California, you're from Orange County area,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Oh my God, it's same, it's similar. Like it was similar experiences of like these like lovely track home neighborhoods, like
right.
beautiful. It's like it's a total scenario. And I feel like or even my cousins who lived in Orange County, it was like I would go to their gated track home community.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean? It
Hmm.
was like it was a weird thing.
So, how old were you when you were traveling to the half a dozen places you were mentioning? Because those are also very different
yeah.
from obviously Danville, but very different from each other.
Yeah, so like and like Mexico was as like early as I can remember. Like
Mm.
we started traveling there when I was like 8 or 9. It was like my first like international trip that I can remember. And that was like really special and beautiful. And that's why I still like I've been to Mexico 4 times this year. Now I don't go like necessarily to the coast, but I go to like Mexico City. But I am going to the coast. I'm going to Zihuatanejo for
Mm.
New Year. But then like it was Cambodia and Thailand, which was shocking to me. And that was like around 14.
Wow.
And I don't think I was like even I don't think I knew a Thai or Cambodian person. Like I didn't even know the culture. Like I didn't
Hmm.
even know that that was like a culture that existed on planet Earth. And so like honestly, it was
Sure.
like didn't know. And when I remember when I went to Cambodia and I was like 14 and we went to the temples like Angkor Wat and Angkor Thom
Mm.
and Siem Reap, that whole area. Like it was shocking to me that like those places existed and that like there was a whole civilization that had their way of like functioning and their own form of architecture. And I had like never visually experienced it because those are very like face forward. And like even if like let's say you read in your textbooks about certain cultures, you I didn't know those places. So that was amazing. Thailand was like as a 14-year-old was like beautiful and the food and the colors and the smells were like even when I get a certain smell it'll take me back to like that time in Thailand which is like really fantastic. Japan was probably when I was like 16 and
Wow.
I've gone back because I really loved Japan and that was also fascinating too because we did like a similar experience where we did like Tokyo and like the main city and then we also did like like the ryokan and the Japanese like gardens outside of the city, like around Mount Fuji. And like we went to Kyoto, of course, and like
You guys,
Nagoshima.
you guys went
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Like,
So we had like the nice, my mom was a really good traveler.
yeah.
Like she really loved like taking us and traveling and like my mom had this like lovely boyfriend at the time and like who was like I say boyfriend, he was like a part of our lives for 14 years.
Hmm.
And he was like a very much like a like grab your like Lonely Planet book at that time and go on an adventure. And he like Lonely Planet was the thing at the time, and we would go to like the most random offshoot places and like random islands and things like that. And it was like such an amazing experience. And he was actually from Marin. And he
Oh,
was
okay.
actually, yeah, and he kind of like later in life I realized like he was like introduced like a lot of the things that I like mentally take in, like hiking and nature and going and traveling to like destinations that are very far and like unexpected. And then Kenya was when I was like, I did my senior thesis there in college. So I was there for 2 months. My sister had been working for like a secondary school there for a year. And I went there and I like did I studied landscape architecture and I went there and I went to like understand their agricultural practices and like both contemporary and historically, and then like some of the historical practices were actually much more beneficial to their situations they were in, and just like trying to see how we could implement that and
Wow.
like in the education system there. I was like 21, so like sounds way cooler than it was. But it was like I mean my thought process was
Yeah.
like but we like planted like a beautiful like tree orchard. We created like swales. We like did like planted like biodiverse plants that like encourage the microorganisms in the soils. Like it was like a very lovely experience.
That's incredible. And you said that you were studying landscape architecture. So let's say in the story, so you go through high school. Did you go to college right after high school, like the typical American
Totally.
route?
Yeah, I was forced. Like my
I
like
was
literally
okay.
I remember like talking to my mom and being like, "Hey, I have no clue who I am and I like have no clue what I want to study." And like I was not a very like school person. And I was like, I don't want to be in that setting. And I asked my mom, I was like, I want to take a year of traveling. And she was like, okay, you can do your year of traveling, but like last thing I need you to do for me is like go to college and like just do like a 4 year degree. And if you do that, like then go do what like whatever you want with your life.
Hmm.
And so like I like looked at like the colleges around and like I knew UCs because my sister had gone to UCLA.
Hmm.
And so I applied to like all the UCs and I got into like the specific one that I was kind of interested in was UC Davis
Hmm.
because I was like, okay, if I have to study something, like what do I care about? And I was like, oh, I like nature and I like design. And I was like, landscape architecture sounds like an interesting thing to do.
Mhm.
And so I did that. And like, yeah, I
And
could tell you, I like, I didn't even, I knew that was the program I wanted to do, but then I like went in as like a Chicano Latino studies major because like it was like a side way to get in because I didn't have the best grades. And I did get
Interesting.
in, and then I transferred. And then the funny thing is, like, my whole family laughs, and they're like, "You went in as a Chicano Latino studies major, and you were just doing that to like get in." And they're like, "You've spent like so much time in Mexico, and you're obsessed with it." And it's so funny. You probably should have studied that. Like you would have loved it. And I was like, I should have.
So were you able transition to landscape architecture?
Totally. So I like it was like it was an intense like you had to submit a portfolio. The program only accepted like 40 students per year. And
Wow.
like for someone who was like said they didn't care about school, I was actually really intense and I did care.
Hmm.
And so and I picked a major that was like also very intense and like a 4 to 5 year program. But I got in and it was more of the experience that I cared about having like in a school experience. Like it was way more project oriented,
Hmm.
design oriented. It wasn't like like learning a bunch of information and then taking a test. Like you learned a lot of information, and then you had to implement it into design, which I like really, really loved.
So I'm kind of curious, the landscape architecture program, once you started it, were you surprised by anything? Because landscape architecture is a pretty niche profession and a thing to study.
I think yes, I was like the two aspects, maybe two or three aspects that I was like I think that linger on in me as we're like progressing the storyline. I think like I realized like the UC Davis like system is which like as a kid, like as a college student, I didn't like appreciate. I was like, oh dang it, I didn't get to UCLA, so I'm not going to be able to like party in West Hollywood. That's where my mind was at, and so like then I went to like Davis, and I was like, oh whoa, like okay, like adjust to this reality, and it's like and like my friends were hippies. Like they were like all about sustainability. And I like lived in a co-op for like 8 months of where you like grow your own
Yeah,
food.
yeah.
And it was like, and then like while that was happening socially, like in my landscape architecture courses, we learned so much about sustainability and like the broad scope of it. Sustainability, not like, oh, recycle, but like what the like environmental, economic, and like social equity issues that like not being sustainable can like create. And like it really like shifted my mind. And I feel like it honestly made me like aware of like, oh, whoa, like this world is like off. Like it's a little bit off how we function and how we like exist. And it was like, oh, that's really informative. So I don't need to like you can't just assume like everything that you're being taught, which I had been taught up to that point is like the valid way of existing.
Hmm.
And so I feel like that really shifted my mind and being more like questioning, being more like, oh, like the like existing forms of like how things function aren't necessarily the correct ways. A lot of it's sloppy, a lot of it's like not the best way.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like one aspect that were like this sustainability aspect and like learning, like the term is like learning about the three E's, like economy, equity, and the environment, which like still lingers in my head. Um, and then and then the other aspect was just like being like very conscious of like your own time and like knowing like when it's like very much more project based, you kind of like have to learn how to it's like up to you how much you want to care about this project and how much you want to bring into it and how much you want to like organize around it and how much you want to be in depth about it. And so like for me, I like learned on early on that like, okay, if I don't care about something, don't pay too much attention to it. And when you care about something, like really enjoy it and go into depth with it. Because it's like that's like where you feel full.
Mm.
Whereas like when you take a test, you're just studying for the test and you like need to get a certain percentage or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like with a project based like curriculum, it was like go into depth with what you care about, which I think like really affected me. And then like the third thing is like history, just like learning about history, learning about landscape architecture history was like really fascinating and like how different like governments or like historical moments, like one major thing that I like loved to write about was like the difference between like how landscape is designed for like monarchs versus like a more like parliament style government versus like a democracy. And like just how like a landscape is designed is like very affected by what the like priorities are of like a society.
Hmm.
So like that really was like those things like really shifted my mind.
That's really fascinating. So my master's is in urban design, and so therefore we had a number of classes that were with landscape architects and teachers who are landscape architects. And prior to that experience, I had never had much engagement with a landscape architect in that kind of space. other than occasionally like on a professional project, you might have one as a fellow professional. But that was the first time I was surrounded by these kinds of folks. And what's interesting about what you're saying, and from what I recall, is that the perspective that landscape architects have due to their training and education and what they care about is like global. It's
Totally.
huge. It's not like, oh, you're a landscape architect, so you help people choose flowers. Like it goes
No.
way. I mean, it's truly like fundamental. It's larger scope than most architects think, I would say.
Totally. Because you're really thinking about how like systems also function. So it's always taking you from like the micro to the macro.
Hmm.
So it's like it starts like where you're talking about as small as like, oh, okay, like someone's home. And then it goes into like someone's neighborhood. And then it goes into a region. And then it goes to like a state. And then it goes to a country. And then it goes to global. So it's like always thinking about like how these systems function within each other, which just gives you like it helps you zoom out of like certain realities that like people like to stick to.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
So, how do you transition from landscape architecture to what you do now? Or like after you graduated, did you practice in landscape architect, or what happened
No,
afterward?
no, I like didn't because I loved all those high level type of things that we're talking about. And then like I didn't even know how to function with those high level things and like a landscape architecture degree that I saw my friends doing. Like they were getting internships and jobs. And I was like, I can't. I'm like, I don't know if I can like work for like a landscape architecture firm and do those things. Like I 100% cheated on my like grading and drainage like tests. Like I literally took my friend's stuff, cheated. That was also just like my vibe of like, I don't care about that. I don't need to learn it type
Right.
of thing.
Yeah.
I'm being forced. And I was like, I don't care. And then like in a lot of things that like I saw my friends having to do, I was like, I think I would be really like unhappy doing
Mm.
that.
Like the technical.
Like the
I see.
technical, the like the technical aspect of it, the like and also I didn't know. I think I just didn't know and I was like really terrified to work because I had never worked in my life.
Mm.
And so I was just like really nervous about like having like people ask me to do those type of things.
Do you think
And
you
I
were
just
do you think you were scared of failing?
I was scared of like I don't know what I just like honestly I didn't know like I didn't know how I was gonna become like to be like Oprah or something. I didn't know how I was gonna become the human I wanted to become. Like I literally and I just like knew that if I went and worked at a landscape architect firm, I wasn't gonna become the human that I wanted to become. And
Mm.
I don't know why that like was like so like I was so against it. And I like came back to my mom and I was like, okay, I want that year of traveling. And she's like, no, you're off my payroll, like get a job. And she was like, so I was like, oh my God, okay.
You're like,
I
yeah,
can't
hey, that wasn't the deal.
yeah, literally. Yeah. She was like, well, I fooled you. Now you have a 4-year degree. Enjoy. And so, which I'm so grateful for.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay. So like what I really did, like the honest to truth thing that I like don't always tell, but I'll tell you guys is like I literally, I mean, I don't know if I told you guys over when we had dinner that one time, but like I think I might have, but I like literally went on Craigslist and went like into the design section and which like landscape architecture stuff was there and then all the other stuff. And then I saw like interior design. I don't even think I knew what interior design was. And so I like was looking at all the different descriptions and I was like, and I again that also terrified me. It was like proficient in CAD, proficient in
Right.
this, like
Yeah.
Excel and like all these like terms that like terrified me. And I was like, I don't like know. And I saw like a design ad, like an ad or a Craigslist ad, and it was like with like smiley faces and exclamation points. And I was like, well, that seems like that person's not going to be too tricky. Like I can go work for them and like it'll be fine. And the person who made that ad like 10, 12 years ago is like one of my best friends, Andrea Suarez. Like she's one of my best friends. She has like an art consultancy firm now that I use now. She lives in Connecticut now, but so I go to do like the interview for this this like interior design firm, but also like antique dealer.
Hmm.
And so I like walk in and it's like there's like sisal flooring and there's like 17th, 20th century European like antiques everywhere, like chandeliers and like marquetry tables
Oh
and like
boy.
pietradora, and it's like everywhere. But I was like none the wiser. I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. I see Andrea, my friend, who now is my friend, and she
Hmm.
was like this beautiful, like brunette, like magic person. And she was like, oh, like my boss was like, my future boss was coming in later. And she was like, oh, she's running a little bit late, but just feel free to look around. And so I looked around and it was beautiful. It was like magic and beautiful in there, and it like had a special feeling. And then all of a sudden, my boss walked in, or my future boss walked in, and she was like had like big black sunglasses on and had like like black lace dress, and like she had formerly been trained as like a Playboy bunny. And so she
Okay.
like the way she would move is like her boobs would go one way and her butt would go. She was like this, and you guys just I remind you, she was like 65 at the time.
Oh
Okay.
Like she was,
wow.
yeah, but like big hair, like this magic hair. And I was like, okay, I can get into this. And so we like go back and she like interviews me and she's just like asking all these questions. She's really beautiful and like lyrical with the way she asks her questions. She's really like the way she makes eye contact is almost like witchy. And then she like saw my portfolio and she was like, "Oh, you don't have any interior design experience." And I was like, "No, but I like do. I like study landscape architecture." And she like looked at my work and she's like, "Well, the work is like really beautiful. I actually like have a degree in landscape design as well."
Oh wow.
And she was like looking through it and she like asked me about like one project and it was like about a redesign for like an arboretum at UC Davis.
Hmm.
And like I talked about like the microorganisms and the butterfly and the bee culture and then the canopy layer and like how I wanted it all to work together. And it was like beautiful. Like it looked beautiful and the graphics of it were beautiful. And she was like, you know what? She was like, I think you like will really love doing this. And so she like, and then she asked me like, what sign are you? And I was like, I'm an Aquarius. And she was like, perfect. We need an Aquarius in my office. And so she like it was on and we had an amazing time and I like worked for her for that first round for like 2 years and she really like taught me about the provenance of like antique furniture.
Hmm.
And that's where I kind of like learned about like okay like the woodwork detail, the marquetry, and like the pietradura I was telling, the stonework, the chandeliers, the iglomise, and like all those things like I thought were so fascinating at that time, and a lot of how that artisanship like doesn't even exist now. And like the history behind it, I thought was really beautiful. Um, and and she was just great at like she also like on that end, she also was like great at going to events, and she would take me to events, and she would show me the city, show me the different the
Wow.
day, like the life of like being an interior designer. And I was like, this will lead to the human that I want to be. Like this will lead, I don't know how, but this will like, and so I was just like really lucky in that first thing. Um, and it just worked and it flowed. But then like you guys see my interior design now and like what we do at Studio Head. And like I feel like even when I was talking about landscape architecture, like the difference between different like governments and monarchs and things like that, there's something that I lost a little bit of magic towards, like 17th to 20th century antiques, like from France,
Hmm.
um, because it's a lot of it's based on like holding power,
Mm.
Right.
Mm.
showing power. You know what I mean? And like being like I don't think there's anything humble about like a Louis the 14th chair or like a gilded chandelier. Like
Sure.
there's nothing like it's to show that you have more power over other people,
Hmm.
which I don't like that energy. And
Hmm.
so like I think what I gained from that first experience that like showed me the world of interior design was like even though I didn't like necessarily like the energy because the objects are beautiful, like
Hmm.
gorgeous, but I don't like the energy it emits. But I do love the artisans that created and had this like special skill. Like I think that's really what I took from that moment of time.
That's an interesting observation, and I think it's a much more nuanced way of appreciating, understanding, and dissecting things, whether they be pieces and objects or entire buildings or landscapes. Is there different layers of it? Like you said, there's an embedded energy, right? There's a political kind of aspect to how things were created or
Totally.
why they were created, which is not always the most benevolent.
Well, and it's interesting because it seems like you, in some ways, you're thinking about those objects and those elements in a very sensible and personal way rather than just purely on how they look and, maybe like the
Hmm.
fact that everybody just keeps repeating and reusing these objects without really either questioning them or repositioning them or rejecting them even.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
it's interesting to me that you're very mindful about what they are, what they mean, and what it means to you and your work.
totally. I mean, I think that is exact. And like even like what how you're describing, like even when I take, because I do love those antiques. They are beautiful, but it's just like at a certain point, it's like even it take it back to like breaking them, like understanding the matrix when we were like kids in cul-de-sacs. Like you have to understand like, oh, I'm like emitting something or like giving an energy when I reuse this furniture,
Mm.
or I'm like the people who are attracted to it are doing like that. They may not be conscious of it, but
Hmm.
like there's a way different human being that chooses like a gold gilded chandelier versus someone who likes a Noguchi paper like lantern.
Hmm.
And it's because the thoughts that created both those things are completely different. And the person when I like Noguchi wanted to democrat like create like something that could be used universally and was like soft and warm, like warm. It's like very democratic in a way, versus like the other thing was like to show power. It's like very different feelings.
That's very, very interesting. And I
So,
think for, yeah.
wait, so how did you survive in a surroundings that was just those antique pieces everywhere?
Because didn't understand. Like I think I now can reflect on it and
Uh-huh.
like
Mhm.
understand how I've got to this moment. And like that's because I take edibles and lay in my bed and think a lot. But I like think about like, oh, why didn't I? Like I loved it, but there was something about why I didn't resonate with it. And to be quite honest, I didn't resonate at all. So because like the type of person it attracted was like not
Mm-hmm.
the type of person that like I was attracted to. Like I
Sure.
liked it, but I was like, there's something that I like don't really relate to because I don't I now that I'm like living more like my truth and I've had these thoughts and like you see the ethos of our like work. It's like now the clients that we do get, they're like on the same wavelength.
Yep.
It's like all about the different types of wavelengths. It feels much more like the clients that we get are like much more the people that I like want to exist with on the planet.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And I like what you said earlier about the person who chooses the Noguchi fixture versus the other one. Like those are inherently and many times different people. Not always. Sometimes people
Mhm.
like something and they'd have no idea why, and maybe they're
Totally.
ignorant to the background.
100%.
And it just takes a little bit of education of saying like, like this has certain implications, and like, oh yeah, no, that's not me. I just thought it was cool looking, and kind of move on. But I like this idea that there's an embedded history and a meaning to things, and that's, I mean, I think that's probably one of the big differences I see between, let's say, designers and the average person. The average person, a lot of times, they look at things, and their way of deciding whether or not it's good or bad is purely aesthetic.
Totally. Totally.
So what happens after you're working at that for that interior designer, the Playboy bunny or
Yeah.
whoever?
So after her, then I got like recruited to another company that was like high-end interior design
Hmm.
and uh I'm like, I don't know if I'm supposed to say names. Like, am I supposed to name names? So it was like Jeffrey D'Souza Interior Design.
Okay.
And so he brought me on to his company, and I was like his right hand man. Um, and he has a cool Jeffrey D'Souza interior design. He also owns with Eric Hughes, D'Souza Hughes.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like the marriage of those two. Like, so Jeffrey D'Souza interior design was another aspect, and we would also work on like the showroom and like selecting like what like the new like collections that are going to come from the different vendors into that showroom, what fabrics are going to be on them, and then like evolving the showroom, and then also having like the interior designers or the interior design. And so like I transitioned to him, and I was excited because he had like large scale projects, like big projects that were more contemporary. Um, and it was like an exciting moment because he brought me like right when I started with him, he brought me on to like a really big project where the clients were like young, like they were probably like 29 at the time, and they were like young, like billionaires. So it was like really exciting to like be on a project of that caliber. And my Jeffrey at the time was like really nice about me. He was like, you know what, they're gonna like relate to you because you're closer to age than them. And
Mm.
he's like, I think it'll be like a nice experience to have you there. So it won't be as like off-putting for them that like a grown man is like telling them how to like design their home.
Hmm.
And so that was like really, really fantastic to have that experience and like do it. And like the beauty of like Jeffrey and like him having the showroom was like he really taught me less, like it was less about like the artisans and antiques, it was about the artisans now. So a lot of the people that like D'Souza Hughes represents, it's like there is like a high-end artist, and I wouldn't say it's like an artisan specific, but it's like you do have high-end makers, like furniture makers, who yes are like a little bit more glamorous, but like it shows like how you can like make custom furniture, make custom pieces, play with materials. Each specific piece can have such a unique reality. And I think like Jeffrey really taught me that and was like, okay, this is a chair, but like what finish are we gonna pick? What like are we gonna add sabots to the bottom? Are we gonna like reupholster the back and like the welting on the back detail? What do we want to do for that? Like the questions that were asked were really specific and intense, and it was like really good. And it was like the first time that I had been on a project where it was like, and this was at 25. So the first time that I'm on a project where I'm at the meetings and there's like a well-known architect, a well-known contractor, a well-known landscape architect, and like to see a scale of a project at that level and be like at the front lines of it was like amazing. So it was like really beautiful. And it was like one of those projects that's like a 2, 3 year project.
Wow.
And so you
Wow.
really have to like see the whole thing to fruition. And we made like so many custom pieces of furniture. And like I had to deal with like a lot of the furniture makers here in the city. And they were my teachers. Like they also like I was 25. Like I had no clue what I was doing.
Hmm.
I mean, I shouldn't say that, but I like didn't. And like I like would go to work at like 6 in the morning and like finish work at 8 p.m. because I was on such a learning curve, and like I
Wow.
gained 20 pounds, and like I had one eye twitching by the end of it. Like my mom was
Oh
like,
What?
my
"Are you okay?"
gosh.
Wait,
She's
really?
like, "Are you?" Yeah, no, not joking.
Oh,
Like I
geez.
have photos from that moment, and I was like, not cute. And so it was like really, but I really was so excited to learn like that reality of it. And I like and like life opportunities only happen every now and then. And when like I see a life opportunity happen, which I felt like that was one of them, like I was like, just go in, like deep dive into this, and I did, and it was like it was intense and fantastic, and like taught me so much.
I was going to ask you, like, yeah, did you feel a bit overwhelmed getting on that
All the
project and all of
time.
All
that?
the
But
time for 3
yeah, I
years.
mean, starting your day at 6 in the morning and ending at 8,
Long day.
it's intense.
And I also didn't want anyone to know because I was embarrassed.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like I was embarrassed about the things that I didn't know. And so I like, instead of like, I would try to learn. So I would like try, I would be like, I would Google like, when does the contractor need all the lighting specifications?
Hmm.
When does like, when do we need to do the light? And I would like, and I remember there was like a lighting designer like in that building, and I went and I'm not kidding you guys. I would go and I would sit. It was like a master's program. I would go and sit with the lighting designer. I'd be like, what should I know about like when we're installing? Because you're like
Hmm.
installing like high-end fixtures and you're making decisions about the scutcheon, about like the like bulb decisions and all these things. And I would literally go sit and like people were so nice, I think, because I was 25 and it was a big deal project. So they were like
Hmm.
I don't know, people were really just nice. And that's what I find most of the time. People are like really nice when people are curious. And so I would sit with them with like C. Mariani, who was making a lot of the furniture. Like I would literally like I would ask for more meetings than they're probably used to because I would always have questions. And it wasn't the time of Zoom. So I'd like get in my car, go there, and they would be like, "Oh, Homan, yes, when we're doing like a leather upholstered bed, when it dies into the wood edge, like we need it to be like like 0.25 thickness." And like I would constantly ask these questions. Oh yeah, we need to electrify the bed. And they would like educate me about what needs to go into the bed to like make it electrified.
Hmm.
And so like I just felt like people were really nice and helpful and like and I was just like, okay, you're learning. Like figure like it was a moment to figure it out. And it was really cool.
Yeah,
And
that's
I'm grateful
amazing.
to all and it, like a lot of the vendors that I worked with then when I was 25 is like still like some of the people like C. Moriani I use all the time, like Rossi I use all the time. The lighting person, she's not in business anymore, but I love her.
Do
Hmm.
you still harass
Dude.
them with questions or?
I still see Mariani less. No, I teach senior designers to harass them with
Okay, good.
questions. I'm like, you guys, when you don't know, like go in there, admit you don't know, let them teach you, let them like. I was like, because every time we're making custom furniture, there's so many questions. Like, I'm not even the person to ask. Ask them. Like, we have this vision, this idea of like a piece of furniture, and like, let's ask them because they're the artisans. They're the ones who are like extremely smart about this. So it was cool. It was cool. And I remember even I was so into all the different I remember like even the contractor on the project got me a t-shirt that was their logo. He was like, "You were a part of our team." He was like, "You were a part of our," and he got me a t-shirt with the logo of the contractor. I remember the lighting designer. She was like, "Homan, you have to come to like our Christmas dinner." And it was just the Christmas dinner of like her team of five and me. And it was like, because I really would get into it with everyone. Like I would really, and they were just nice. They also understood that like I was kind of a child.
You were the foster kid of like, I don't know how
Yeah,
many different families.
That's cool.
It's cool.
totally.
That's
Yeah,
amazing, though. I mean, I think it's a good kind of, I suppose you call it a life lesson in a sense, or a way of working when you don't know something, is to just ask. And if, assuming you're not surrounded by assholes, like people are usually willing to talk about their craft. And, I think everyone in the trades that you mentioned, and this extends to interior designers and architects and contractors, like it's tough work to create stuff. Any project based profession where you're making something is difficult. And I feel like most people that we've come across, if you're curious and you want to know about something, and especially if you're on a project with them, they're game to tell you because it's their passion, and also they probably want the project to turn out well. So
Yeah.
they're like, okay, here's someone who actually cares, unlike maybe perhaps other professionals who seem to care less.
totally. They were also just like both those realities that you're mentioning. They were also like, oh, we also don't want it to be a mess up in the future. Like we're
Hmm.
8 months before that actually happens. So let's make sure we're ordering the right way that we should be ordering. So yeah, no, it was like really lovely.
So,
So
so how did the project turn out?
It turned out really
Really
beautiful.
good.
It was like a really amazing project, but I like had mentally and physically
Yeah.
like killed myself. Like I was really like I don't think I was like in the happiest place.
mm,
Like I was so like it's two different realities. It's like, oh, work, excited, I'm making it happen, but I think like like, you know how I was mentioning, like, oh, how am I going to become the person that I want to become?
Hmm.
I was like, oh, whoa, this isn't like, this isn't what I had thought of becoming the person that I wanted to become. Like, I'm like gaining weight. I'm like one eye's twitching. I'm
Right.
working like a Looney Tunes. Why? And I was like, I didn't know why, but I was like, this doesn't seem healthy. This
Sure.
like doesn't seem like a healthy way of existing. Um, and so like if you want, it can go into like that's when I left that job
Mm.
and I like with no plans for the future.
Hmm.
You just needed a break.
I like needed a break. I was
Yeah.
like, and I told my boss, I told him he was very disappointed. Um, and now he's not disappointed. He's proud of me. But like now he's proud of me. But he was like very disappointed. He was like, whatever, did his thing. And then, yeah, and I just left and I was like, I was going like, and I'm very much the person who like does my job and also likes to go to events.
Hmm.
So I was like very much like my whole life was like revolved around
Yeah.
interior design. And so when I left that, I knew like that I was going to be like a kind of a depressive moment because like my whole life was intermission in it and I didn't even know if I wanted to continue interior design.
Really?
Like I was just like no yeah, I didn't know. And I like knew like everybody was going to be asking me why like when I go to the events, like the people that I knew and like I knew like going from like 100 miles per hour to like waking up like in my house and like not having anything to do. I was like that's not my vibe. So I
Mm.
was like, so like, I'm not kidding. Like the second I left that office, I like got on my phone and like booked a ticket or like a Google search, like best places in Mexico for Spanish immersion programs. And I like went, and like the three options were Mexico City, Puerto Vallarta, and Oaxaca. And I was like, Puerto Vallarta, like have been going there since I was a kid. I was like, I know everyone speaks English there. Like, I don't want to be on that coastal town.
Hmm.
Mexico City, I was like, wasn't aware of how magic Mexico City was, but I also didn't want city energy.
Hmm.
So I was like, okay, I'm not there. And then Oaxaca, I had never heard of. And I was like, okay. And I Googled some images and I was like, that's pretty. And then I was like, and I was like, okay, let's do it. And I went and I like signed for this 2 month Spanish immersion program. And I was like on a flight in like 6 days and like went and lived there for 2 months.
Wait, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, at least you didn't just stay in your house in San Francisco and
For
get
6 months?
depressed for
That would have
6
been
months.
bad.
Like you immediately reacted to that decision, which is, you know, pretty ballsy, I have to say.
It was a ballsy move. And I even made rules. I was like, when you go to Oaxaca, I was like, no cell phone. You're just gonna have like, you're gonna have like one of those. I don't even know if these exist anymore. Like the little cell phones that you can text people on. And like you can't make a call, but I had like no one's number. Like you're gonna make international calls. It wasn't like Verizon or whatever.
Right.
And then I was like, no laptop. So you're going to go to like an internet cafe when you need to like email or
Mm.
check in. And then I like even made rules. I was like no boyfriends, no like no becoming like super meshed in a social group. And I'm not kidding. I went and was like a monk for 2 months. I was like part of the Spanish immersion program and like I would go walk around the town and go do tours like outside of the town. I would get back home and start reading at like 8 p.m. and then go to bed at 9 p.m. And it was like, I'm telling you, one of the most like beautiful moments. It was like a reset. It was a
Hmm.
total reset and it was really beautiful magic. And like I fell in love with Oaxaca. And speaking of like, I don't know what you want to call it, but the universe, it's like the artisans in Oaxaca, like playing up on that line. It was like I was like introduced to all like Oaxacan clay. I was like the way they use the agave to like make these weavings and like all these specific nuanced things. And the food, like the food was like the best Mexican food I've ever had because the gastronomy there is so amazing. Like it's really, and like the design, like you would go to restaurants, you would go to like the boutique hotels, you would go to like the architectural sites, and it was like the pyramids there are different from the pyramids like from like the more central region.
Hmm.
So it was like such a different experience. I like was like that was a mad I cried when I left because I knew I wasn't I was like I'm not at the age to be a monk, but I really love this. Like I
Not at
really
the age
love
to be a monk.
Is what's the age?
the age is like the next time I burn out.
Yeah.
But so you didn't
That's it.
consider staying there, like I don't know, just live in Oaxaca?
So then like the part of the story is like on the way to Oaxaca, I stopped in Guadalajara, and that's like a whole story that's not for this. But like to see like my first love and whatever, my first love had like a new boyfriend. And so like I went to like a yeah, so like I went to like a restaurant that I had known because I had been to Guadalajara before. And this restaurant I really liked and my family really liked it. And it was part of like a furniture showroom in a beautiful street. And it was like Tlaquepaque is the name of the street, and it's beautiful. And so I went and sat at that restaurant, and like this guy asked to join me, and I was like, "What the hell do I have to lose? Like, why not?" And so he like joined me, and he was the like I thought he was the host of the restaurant because he was like he
Mhm.
wasn't, turns out, and he was like the owner of the restaurant and owner of the showroom, and he was like a restaurateur and like a of furniture, like had warehouses for leather for furniture and like had a big company. And so when I flew back from Oaxaca, I had to stop in Guadalajara again to get back home. And he was like, when you stop by in Guadalajara again, he was like, I'm gonna throw you like a big party at my house. And he's like, I'm gonna invite all the best eligible gay bachelors in Guadalajara. And he was like, we're gonna have like a great time because I told him about my first love and how I
Right.
shipped up. And he like picked me up at the airport with a new boyfriend. And so he was like, forget that guy. He's like, we're gonna have a killer time. When I went back to Guadalajara, he definitely didn't have a party for me, but he had a party. Like he called me and he was like, I've been waiting for your phone call. He's like, come to my restaurant. I've shut it down. I'm having a party for my mom. And so we go, he has this amazing party with mariachi, 7 course, like
Wow.
dinner. It's fantastic. His family's like gorgeous and like lovely. Like we're in Mexico and they're like showing up in like fur coats and like jewelry and it's a whole thing. And I'm like, this is wild. And so he was like, hey, he's like, why don't you like, he's like, where are you staying? I was like, staying at this place. He was like, well, why don't you? He's like, I have plans to go to San Miguel de Allende this weekend. Since you like artisans, since you like this thing, he's like, I think you would really like San Miguel de Allende. Why don't you join me for the weekend? And I was like, sure. So like I extended my trip. And then like this led into like a year of me extending my trip. And
Oh.
Oh.
I ended up living with him and we had like an amazing year together. And he was like another part of my reality where he was like a creative entrepreneur. And he like I think what had been missing while I was um like here with my career here
Hmm.
was he taught me a lot of it. So like now even how I reflect on my life now, it's like with David Luna. His name's David Luna Valencia.
Hmm.
And so we would always go to like small towns and like meet with artisans that he used for his restaurants, that he used for his interior design projects. And we would go to his factories and meet with like his like team that worked in the different factories. So like I was exposed to like the most magic places of Mexico with them, with someone who like had like made these like connections over decades. And then we would also travel to like well-known like resort towns where he would also do the interior design. And so we had
Wow.
this like different like these multiple realities. And his message always was about like supporting artisans and Mexican craft. And he was really part of like this movement in Guadalajara called the like Tapatio movement, which is like a term for Guadalajarans and
Yeah,
not
no,
the
the
hot
sauce.
sauce, not the hot sauce, but like it was a movement about like caring about where you're from and not he informed me so much now that I think about it, but like there's a very like a movement about not being Eurocentric and like using Guadalajarian like artisans to make homes. And his home was like amazing, like magic. Like every time I was there, it's like it's such he had like a gorgeous garden that he had like made. He had beautiful like the adobe homes that were like the walls are like 12 inches thick, like
Hmm.
huge paned windows, staircases that like you know how the staircases now are like the white staircases, like that's in style. He
Hmm.
had that, but it was like with like molded like plaster so you could see the hand movement as you're going up it. Like it was really gorgeous. And he had a country home that was like that, and that was like of that era that we like you would go horseback riding. And it was like towns you never knew, but like unbelievable. There were like it was just wild.
I feel like I
You,
just went on the trip with you right now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I love the story.
My mom came for 1 week. She was like, "What are you doing?" She was like, "What?"
Makes
My
sense.
mom came for 1 week. She's like, she literally like 2 day notice. She was like, "I'm coming. I want to see who you're living with. I want
Mm.
to see what are you doing?" She came and she's like, "Got it." She was like, she was like,
I'm
"I get
saying
it."
no. You now have a third person with you.
Yeah, she's like, that sound. She's like, enjoy this for as long as you want to enjoy this. She was like, have a good time.
What's amazing about this your story so far is that there's been these, very significant experiences, but a lot of them kind of came around kind of by chance in a way. I mean, you sought them out, you put yourself in those positions, but there's the Craigslist thing, which is totally
Completely
wild, and it
random.
worked out
Yeah.
that way. And then the next place, and the next place, like it's pretty remarkable.
Totally. I mean, I think that it's like, I think it's crazy. I think they always say like you look back and it's like, oh, it makes sense and you don't know. But I think I always just was like a curious person and I was down for people who seemed interesting. Like
Hmm.
if someone seemed like interesting and exciting, I was like, I'm gonna lean in. And like my first boss Candace was like interesting and fascinating and beautiful. Jeffrey was magic and intense and passionate. And then David Luna, when I met him, was like beautiful. Those are all like all those people were major mentors in my life. And like that's just like what I'm speaking about in this spot. Like certain family members have been like mentors and like even they started like my mom, how she made me travel and do all of that. Even like my aunt who would like she's the first person to purchase a place in Mexico and we would go to Mexico. It's like this like I think things add up when you like lean into your interests. I
Mm.
don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it totally does. And I like what's interesting is like maybe some people might be listening and they might think, well, that's just it's kind of it's luck for sure, part of it, right? But it's luck and things happen randomly. But there seems to have been always this question that you're fairly aware of like who do you want to become, and when things don't feel natural, you kind of just stay away from those things or you migrate towards something else. And I think, not to get too philosophical, but it's sort of an important question for folks to ask themselves. I think otherwise it's very easy to end up in a career and a spot or a job more specifically where you're doing something you're not super thrilled with, but hey, it's been 10 years you're doing it. You have a good, 401k, you have good vacation time built up or whatever. And now that's kind of your life.
Yeah, and I think the fact that you're basically thinking about yourself as almost a project in itself,
Uh,
right? And it's kind of
Totally.
an interesting thing that I think you're right, David. Like a lot of people just kind of like miss the mark on that. They just get trapped in the grind and just doing something that they like, but maybe not necessarily working on becoming the person they want to be, like you're
mm,
saying. And I think they kind of
Totally.
both go hand in hand. And I think you could probably be a happier person and a more successful person if you get both sides to work than just focusing on one.
Totally. And I think even like having a balance of those realities, like you're saying, I think a lot of the times, even with those scenarios where I would go, I'm like a deep diver into
mm,
like these different realities, a lot of that comes with like heartbreak too.
Yeah.
And
sure.
like, you know what I mean? It comes with like, oh wow, like wow, that moment's over, or like, oh, that was like so beautiful, that was magic. And then you like don't know, it's like so beautiful that you don't even know what the next step is going to be or how it's going to be as special as the moment you just had or like
Mm,
special in a different way Or like even I think through my whole 20s, I was like, is this compounding to anything? Like I'm just like having these like beautiful experiences. But then but now I see how it's like aligned and how it like led to this moment. But or like even the ethos that I carry in my head and
Hmm.
like how I like to exist. I mean, even this is like a shirt that David Luna like makes, and like I still get clothes from him because I love his clothes that he makes. But um, but it's just like, yeah, it's interesting. It's like a an way of functioning.
So after you do your 3 months or however period of time with the what,
A year,
a
right?
year, yeah,
A
sorry,
year.
the year, the 3 months that turned into a year or whatever it was, you came, did you
Yes.
come directly back to the Bay Area?
Then I did. So
Okay,
like
so you're like
I
this refreshed new person now.
totally, and also like delusional because I like had
Okay.
to like because I had just like lived this magic like
Yeah.
life in Mexico, and I was like came back, and I remember like I saw like my like I was just like on another cloud,
Yeah.
and I like came back, and I was like didn't get that I'm back in San Francisco and didn't have like that lifestyle, and so I like had to like figure it out. And then like to what you were saying earlier, you were like sometimes you get like into these realities that like shift you. And I like the one rule I had when I came back um from like the experience with David was like I was like I never want to be like an employee.
Hmm.
Like and I had always in my head like I forget who told me one of my mom's very good friends always told me like start a business before you turn 30. Like no matter what, you have to start a business before you're 30. And then David also like taught me like just being his like person who would go with him everywhere because it really was like we would work and live like together.
Hmm.
It was like an apprenticeship almost. And it was like, oh, I want to be like a creative entrepreneur. And I was like, so never, I was like, never become an employee again. Like, make sure. So I would only take like contracts. And
Hmm.
so I went back to my first employer, Candace, and I was like, hey, Candace. And she heard I was back and she was like excited. And she was like, hey, I heard you're back. Would you like at all want to come back and join? And I was like, sure, I would come back for like 2 days and it would be more like of a consulting thing. And then she was like, cool. And it became like 2 to 3 days and did that. And then like one of my other family friends had always wanted like me to help her with her company, which she had like a furniture rental company.
Hmm.
And so she was like, would you be oh she's like, I think you'd be really good at this. And she was like, do you want to come and do that? And I was like, okay, I can do that like 2 days out of the week. And so I was like, okay. And so like I took these things because I was just like had a hard rule of not being an employee. And I like and you guys like on top of it, like being a like I'm not like a real housewife of Mexico. Like while I was living with David, he like he could see that I was like getting like antsy and like I'm a busy minded person.
Hmm.
And he was like, Homan, you have like all the options. Like which factory do you want to use to make a product? And I was like, oh, I've always like wanted to make a travel bag line. And like I feel like every real housewife like wants that. And so she like she like so I like made a travel bag line and like I like made the bags, like designed it with one of his factories, picked the leather,
Wow.
picked the branding, like did the photo shoot, created the website. And when I came back to um San Francisco, like even after we broke up, he was like, "Hey, you still have that. Like when you need to develop things, you still use my factory."
Hmm.
I was still working it, and so I came back, and so those were my three realities. The
Wow.
travel back thing, I was just like joking with myself, honestly, even though it visually looked amazing. It was fantastic. And like I remember had meetings. Like I even had a meeting with Barney's, like of Barney. Like
What?
I would go on LinkedIn and like send my website to buyers from like Barney's, Saks Fifth Avenue. Like I would go and do like meetings, but I was like everybody knew I was like had no clue what I was doing, or they didn't, or they were just like I don't know. I didn't know what I was doing,
Right.
and so then I was like that kind of depleted, and then doing the interior design stuff was good, and but it was still like not in the real. I had been exposed to like what David Luna had showed me about like the artisans, and that's where I kind of like the vocabulary that I'm using now like is it was like just not the same way, and I didn't care about the way we were doing interior design
Mm.
necessarily. And then with the events, and that's I think it speaks to like when you're making good money and you're like get in a grind and you do something, the events, because I am like entrepreneurial in a way, and the events, like I redid the branding, like we started redoing like the furniture collection because my aunt like was very obsessed with like Italy, and she her whole thing, and not my aunt, I call her my aunt, my very good family friend, and she like did was very good like with going to Italy, and then she would get like look at designs, and then she would like rethink them, have them manufactured in China, and then bring them here. But it was very like very Italian and over the top and like totally like a vibe. And she's that.
I see.
She's like big red lipstick, earrings, like Chanel ear, like that energy. And I was like, and like even thinking of like a branding strategy for her, I was like, hey, like the major people that we want like events from are like Google, Amazon, Facebook. And I was like, I don't think they are going to relate to these things. Like, sure, maybe you get the one-offs. And so I like then we started looking at like mid-century styles and like asking, like I was like, I think we need to stop guessing what they want. Let's like go. And I started like developing relationships with these companies.
Hmm.
And I would ask them like, what do you think about this? We're going to start making these pieces of furniture. Would you like rent these for your events? And so that became very successful. And so that became, we started doing huge events, like 4 to 5,000 people events for like Amazon, Google, and we would bring all the furniture, we would handle the whole event
Wow.
and do the whole thing. And it became like really like it was becoming really successful. And so that almost like, I'm not kidding. I don't know. I don't want to let that almost took me off of like this trajectory because it was financially really fantastic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like growing and you could see the growth. And like when you have a business that's growing, it's like exciting. You get new people. And then that became more my focus. And then what really, really like it was like a hard stop on that. And I, like, okay. So simultaneously as I'm doing that, that like kind of like I stopped doing the back collection because I realized that like wasn't based in reality at all and wasn't even what I cared about. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't like, I like the fashion industry in some aspects, but I really don't like it in other aspects.
Mm.
And I was like, I don't want to do that. And then like with the interior design that I was doing, I was realizing like the interior design work that we were doing is like not exciting for me. And I was like, I think I could have like with my business partner, Elena, I was like, I think we could have like our own like business together. And so we started like working together and creating the concept of like what that company would look like, what our ethos would be, what we would care about and things like that. And so that like really so that and then I started doing the like we came up with Studio Ahead. And so we started doing the Studio Ahead energy simultaneously while this event company was like growing a lot. Studio Ahead, we just like had like we got really lucky, and I can go into that later, but like got some couple clients, and then the pandemic put like a huge kibosh on
Right.
the event company, and it was like a major hit. It was like I remember we were setting up for an event for like I think it was for like 800 people. Like there was probably like I don't know, a couple $100,000 worth of rental furniture coming. Like the caterers were cooking, like everything was happening. And I remember Gavin Newsom got on and told everyone that you can't have like gatherings over 50 people. And that was like the start.
Mm-hmm.
And then like our contacts at like Facebook, Google, and Amazon, and I think they had like more intel than we did.
Mm.
They were like, hey, and they were like wanted to give us heads up. They're like, we want to just give you a heads up. We're not gonna like from all the research that's coming in, this isn't gonna be over like over to the point where we want to do the large scale events that we want to do with you until summer 2023. And we were like,
Whoa.
what?
Wow.
Like
They
we were
actually gave that
shocked.
projection.
Yeah, they're like, we're
Wow.
not going to be doing this until like probably summer 2023.
Wow.
And so like all of the contracts we had for the whole year, were like, it's force majeure because
Yeah.
like pandemics are literally part of
Hmm.
like, it's like the force majeure is like an act,
Act of
a will
God.
of God.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so it was like, we had to like return all the deposits while we have it. It's not like it. So it was crazy
Mm.
and it was psycho. And it's like we went from that to like then it was just a crazy scenario. And then I majorly shifted to studio head. And I like it's crazy because that taught me how to like grow and scale and get bigger in an interesting way. And then it was like I did like the same exact thing like with Studio Ahead. Like we like grew and focused and we got very lucky at that same moment that was like that like declined abruptly and we got really lucky with a couple of clients that started and we just like zoomed in and made it happen and like once the shelter in place was over we were like it was like a full on company. We had like 16 members and it was like we got an office as soon as we could get an office and started working together. And so it was like a really crazy thing that happened. But I'm like, I don't want to say this, but I feel like the shelter in place of the pandemic really like forced people to
Hmm.
make decisions like
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle decisions.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would have necessarily had like the movement in studio ahead if that hadn't happened because it made me like do it and it's so much more aligned with who I want to be in the world.
Interesting. That's a roller coaster. So what happened with the furniture renting company?
Gone.
Yeah. That's
Like
wild.
I mean because you have warehouses that are like that cost I think it was like $25,000 a month
Wow.
just to rent the warehouse because you're storing like 60 sofas, like 40 like larger sofas.
Hmm.
Like you're storing like so many different things and then it's just like becomes impossible to maintain. And you can't. And when they're projecting 2023
Yeah.
that no one's gonna have like huge you can't bleed money
Yeah.
till 2023.
Their projections were not far off, actually. I mean, like,
I know, isn't
Yeah.
that
that's crazy.
crazy? That's why I'm like, they know more than we
Yeah,
do.
I
I was
think
going to
you're
say,
right.
because I think the population assumed when it hit, oh, this will last like 6 months, maybe like a year. But no, it's been 3 years or whatever it's been, you know.
Oh, I mean, when they first told us like shelter in place for 2 weeks, like I believed them. I was like, okay, after 2 weeks, this is going to be
Yeah.
resolved. And then when we got that intel, I was like it was almost hard for me to process.
Sure.
Like I was like, what? We've never, I mean, our generation has never, most people that are alive right now have never experienced anything. It's like not like we've like lived through the plague or
Hmm.
like the Spanish influenza or anything.
Yeah. 3 years. Um,
Yeah,
so studio ahead. So a couple of questions. One was you mentioned the first few clients. I'm curious to hear about how those happened and who they were and the projects that came from that. And then also,
totally.
you said like a lot of the things you learned with the furniture renting company, those lessons were applied to Studio Head and helped you grow it.
Totally. So the way the furniture company did like help that reality was just more about like having a vision and like an ethos that like you care about which I like I'll be honest I didn't care that much about the furniture company's ethos because I didn't like the fact that we were producing things in China and
Mm.
I didn't like the fact that like we were like just like kind of redoing mid-century furniture in a way for these events like as a strategy as like a marketing person yeah that was really smart that
Hmm.
like we did that but like as a human being as like my soul I was like no
Hmm.
like this is not like what who I want to be in the world but it was just like that concept like was really helpful of seeing like when you have a like an ethos or a brand. I think that was more of a brand versus Studio Head is more of an ethos.
I see.
So that was more of a brand. I think adding the soul makes it like an ethos. Um, and then like when we first got like our first client, um, was like it was actually through like my sister. My sister was like, hey, she was like, hey, one of my friends from UCLA is like moving to town. and her and her husband are having like a dinner, and it wasn't anything like client. My sister was just like, oh, it's two nice, lovely people moving into town. Let's go to dinner at their place. And I like asked if you could join, and she was single at the time. I was her plus one. Everybody was in relationships,
Okay.
and
Nice.
so she's married now and had a baby. And she was like, she was like, I was like, oh, okay, for sure, let's do it. And so we like go, and I wonder if they're gonna listen to this because they do and listen to this. And I remember going and like we went, it was like a place in Nob Hill, and we like go up the elevator, and then the elevator opens up to their like to the floor, and it's like beautifully like the paneling is like beautifully done.
Wow.
And like then you go to the right, and it's like amazing views from like Golden Gate Bridge, Alcatraz, like you have Marin in the background, and then you have the Bay Bridge. And it's like very nice layout. It's really well done. And I was like, oh, this is beautiful. Like they have a lot of money. And so like it was like obvious to that scenario, but like tasteful. Like it was really tasteful. Like the interior architecture was tastefully done. And so we were sitting at dinner, and like they're like a gorgeous, like lovely, kind couple. And so the husband was talking to me, and he was just like, "Oh yeah, we've like started the interior design project with like one of our like family like I don't know if I should even say like with an interior designer,
Sure,
with an
sure.
interior designer, and
Okay.
was like it's tricky because they live like on the East Coast, and we just got this place, and they're used to more working on the East Coast.
Hmm.
And they're like, do you mind like walking through and like just kind of like giving us your advice and your thoughts? And I was just like, I was like polite at dinner. I was like, oh my God, it did. I mean, the design was like really good. Like it was good. I like, which I think a lot of design is good. And I was like, oh, this is really good. This is like, it looked really nice.
Hmm.
And, um, and like, I think that maybe like the husband or the wife, like knew something in my voice. And like
Yeah.
while we fin and also I just have one of those voices that seems judgy. I think I found out and I'm like not that, maybe I am, but like my voice, I have like that gay voice that sounds judgy. And so I was like, so like one of the, I forget which one was like, hey, can I have your email? And I was like, okay, for sure. And so I like give them my email, and then they follow up with an email, and they're like, hey, do you mind coming back when it's like just us and doing a walkthrough of the space, and like just give us your honest opinion. And then we like walk through, and I just like walk through and like give them my opinions about like certain things that seem like the scale wasn't correct, or like there's like some elements like even with a palette that was missing that like needed some grounding elements. And so they did, and they had a baby on the way. And
Mm.
so their baby was on the way, and they were like, we definitely need to get this like nursery done. And there was a sense of like urgency to do that as well. So I think it helped with the whole reality. And they were like, okay, so we're gonna focus on like doing some of the like last items in the house, and then also like the art level. There wasn't really like art in the house. And so they're like, we want to like do some key art pieces, and then also focus on the nursery. And then so that was like our first client, and like through the process we like did so much with them. And like that was like we worked on that for like a year. And like
Wow.
when we finished that, because we started doing other things. And then when we finished that, I'm not kidding. It's like the last pillow, and like the wife, she started dying laughing, and she was like, "I know." She's like, "I literally love this place now. Like, it's so lovely. It's like what I wanted it to become." She's like, "But you're gonna die laughing when I'm about to tell you what I'm about to tell you." And I'm like, "What?" And she was like, "Honey, we're moving." And I was like,
Oh
"What?" I
no.
was like, "What?" She was like, "We have." She's like, "Well, the husband got a job in like the South Bay." And she was like, we just want like him to be close to the office. Also, we're gonna have like the apartment was very much for like it was originally like for a couple that lived there,
Hmm.
a gay couple that like didn't have children. So there was
Right.
like a huge master suite. There was a large dining room, a big living room, and like there was like one other bedroom that was like so small, and I think it was really like for like the help. And
Hmm.
so that's the room that we like turned into the nursery. And so they were like, we think we just need like another space. And so those type of clients are like, again, when you get like one in a lifetime opportunity, and those clients are friends now, like very good friends. And they like, I've like had a conversation, like, thank you so much for changing my life. Like you really like leaned in, because we laugh about it now. I'm like, you guys, I like had we like Elena and I were just like winging it. And like they're like, you think you were winging it, but you weren't. Like it was like really like awesome. And so to find the new place, we went house hunting with them in like in like in Woodside, Atherton, and Hillsborough, and we like found a property in Hillsborough that was like had grounds, and again, dream human beings. And they were like, what are three architects that you would want to work with? Because they were going to do like a full remodel of the place, and it was mid-century, and so I like offered three architects, one of which was Marmel Radziner, and they came and interviewed, and they got the project, and that project has been going on still. Like we're still like, I have like a art install going in there, like with a beautiful like Gordon Onslow Ford piece that we like found in like that I got introduced to in Inverness. That's like adjacent to the JB Blanket Estate. So like that was a cool, and I think that's how the very first like client started.
Wow, that's a crazy
What a story.
That's a
Yeah.
fantastic story.
Imagine if you had missed that dinner. You know?
That's how life works. That's why I'm like also Looney Tunes about like going to dinner with people, going to like going to events, and like because sometimes it's missed, but like very rarely it's missed. Like people are lovely and nice and good, but also it's like you never know like who your next like David Luna is gonna be, or who your next like those clients like, and you don't know like when you take other people in, it's like you never know like what life you're gonna be like shown, and vice versa. Like it's like a very nice experience, and like, and it's nice to share your life with like their son that was born that we like made. And I always joke that like Elena and I joke that like our first client was not born. Like I was our like he was our first client.
Right.
And we were like in that he's like, I want to say he's about to turn 4.
Okay.
He's about to turn 4. Like his birthday's coming up January. And so he's about to turn 4, and like now we're like his playroom and things like that. But like seeing him grow up, that's the beauty of life. Like being with clients that long, they're also so happy about Studio Head and our trajectory. Like when we grow, they get so excited. So it's like this nice, like those are the meaningful things in life.
That's really cool. And you're right. You never know when you meet somebody what exactly is going to come out of that relationship. As much as I think all of us probably try to predict how things are going to go, it's always surprising every time, actually.
Totally.
Mostly good, sometimes not so good.
Well, and it's about luck, but it's also about, making your luck, right? Like, again, like if you don't go to these events, if you don't go and meet people, well, if you stay in your apartment, nothing's going to come to you and knock at the door, right? You kind of like have to provoke things to happen.
Oh my God. I cannot believe you used the word provoke. That is insane.
Why?
Maybe it's a different, because David Luna, who like, he's like, Homan, do you know how important it is to provoke the situation? It was like, that was his motto all the time. He's like, what I like about you is you provoke the situation. He's like, you do. And the fact that you use that word, he would not, every time I'm like, what, David, you're going to say the situation is provoked now. Like, but he was right. He's like, he was a human collector too, like of magic characters. And he's like, I'm always looking for people who provoke the situation.
Provoke the situation.
It's a very common French word. So yeah, no, it's a good one.
And you know what? That's why, because he grew up in Guadalajara, but he lived in Paris for like a few years. And that's where he learned it, because he spoke French fluently. And that's probably how he learned it.
I have to say, I don't use that word very often at all. Just when it feels really appropriate. So
it did now.
Yeah. That's like shocking, but that's cool.
That's so funny. So your guys' practice, Studio Head, Uh, for people who maybe don't know some background, so how large is the studio? What do you guys focus on? Types of projects, styles of design, scopes in terms of like
Services?
services. Yeah.
So we're 6 people now, and we're still 6 people. We've just become more senior, like added more senior characters.
Mm.
And we like just got a new office in near Heath Ceramics that's larger, and we're really excited because we actually have like the finances to like design this one more. Like the first one we moved to was like we called it like our Brooklyn place because it was just like or like like it was like wood paneled, but we could not touch it up. It like had an iron grate outside, which we thought was like beautiful on the outside of the window, and it was like huge scale. It's beautiful, but it's like we couldn't touch anything because we just didn't have the finances to. This place, like we're finally like able to do it. And like the just on a service level of like what we do is like we do anything from like coming up in and like sometimes people have holes in their homes, and that I see that a lot with like people who like come to us for like art curation or like working. They like the fact that we work with artisans and like want to add some of that energy to their home, so we could do it on that level.
Mm-hmm.
All the way to like we do like full on 3-year projects that like where we're working with like an architect to develop the interior architecture, the landscape architect, and doing like the interior design all the way and like FF&E, but like for people, other people who are listening, just like doing everything like furniture, art curation, um, flooring, like the window treatments, selecting like the materials on the wall, and just developing the whole reality.
Would you guys ever expand to including like architects and architecture within your practice to become, I don't want to say one-stop shop, but have more of those services embedded within the office?
Totally. I don't like I have this like weird I like that makes like seems really cool, and I do love architecture, and I do like Elena loves architecture. She has a background in architecture from Moscow. That's what she studied. Um, and like we're really excited. We're adding one new person to the team, and his focus is really interior architecture, just
Mm-hmm.
because we also want to like elevate that aspect of like what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Because we saw like when we have projects with architects and we can kind of work with them to develop the interior architecture, it's like really fantastic. We're like, okay, it's nice if we have that in-house too, even when we're working with an architect, so we can like develop our ideas in a better way for them
Mm-hmm.
too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's really exciting. Do I think that like we want to add an architecture aspect of it? I don't know. Sounds cool. Sounds like it could be really exciting, because sometimes I feel like we would use even less furniture if we really had our hands on the like architecture, because we would just like make more specific moments than versus sometimes when it's um like sometimes when it's like the architecture and then the interior design and you don't get to be a part of the very beginning process with the architect,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes then you're like making up for moments with like
Right.
the furniture we add. And so it's like I love it when the clients bring us on like right when they the same time they hire the architect,
Yeah.
because then the architect and us can get on the same conversation level. The only thing that I would miss if we did architecture is like even like with you guys, like this dialogue. Like I do
Sure.
like learning. Like I said, like multiple I like
Yeah.
learning. I like learning and I like exploring, and I feel like when we do have projects with other architects, I feel like, oh my God, we get to like learn so much and like get to learn about their thought process and learn how they handle situations and like to deal with spaces. And I feel like every time that's when we get like cool architects to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And like we got a new project with a cool architect to work with. And like I'm so excited to like we did our kickoff meeting just like between ourselves, and it was just like exciting. He was like excited. He was like, oh, that's how you do it? Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's how he was like, why don't we do that? He's like, let's do what you're talking about with your process in the beginning, and let's like go a little bit slower. He's like, and he like leaned in and he was like, that actually makes it exciting. And so, and then vice versa, when we were in the meeting and he was discussing about some of its concepts, I was like, oh my God, I'm so glad he's like mentioning that now because like I'm glad he's like massaging the client's mind towards those reality, which I think they would really like. But then it's massaging my mind into those realities too during the process. So
That's
I like
amazing.
it.
There's a
Yeah.
there's a lot of really cool stuff to talk about with what you said. One of the points that you brought up that I like is that um, like from a business perspective or an office, if you have both architecture and interiors in one house, it's not necessarily because you always 100% of the time only want to do everything together, which is sometimes the case for some offices, and that's cool. But I think like so coming from the architecture perspective or that end of the spectrum, it's like you have the interiors aspect. So yes, on occasion to do stuff on your own, but also that way when we're working with interior designers, we have common ground that we can understand and have a more fruitful relationship. Kind of like what you're saying with having interior architecture within your office. It's to do it, yes, but it's also the benefit of that way you have more of that knowledge base within your office. So when you're working with architects, you have a way to converse and talk with each other. Because otherwise, I think the distance between sometimes the distance between interiors and architecture can be too big, and it's difficult for some offices to kind of speak with each other.
Totally. And I also I think like the talking to each other and communicating, we also don't want to like waste each other's time. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like it's like helpful for like like I think sometimes we'll like it's important to have like some level of feasibility of an idea of how it can happen and like how it could exist and like play with it and like let it linger. And I think having that interior architecture aspect in the office is a good way to like play with and flesh out our ideas before we like necessarily present it to
Mm.
you guys, like the architect.
Hmm.
And then, but like inversely, it's so nice to have like the architect's perspective and like to understand, like, oh, okay, yeah, I like that idea. You know how we can make that idea cooler is
Hmm.
if we like, I've done this detail before. And then it's like really interesting. And like they hide like the lighting in a certain way, which I like, because I always tell architects, like I tell them straight up, I was like, straight up, I tell them, no, I like tell them, and I'm just like, hey, you guys, just like know as like an interior designer, I'm not trying to fill the house with like as much furniture as possible as much like light fixtures as possible or as much like I was like I actually really like the Schindler style where like the lights are like hidden and like you just get like glows or
Right.
like you get the moments like Legorado or Louis Barragon where like
Hmm.
you have so much like filtered light coming into the house so you don't need as much during the day or like even when there's like moonlight. Like I'm with you guys if I don't necessarily want to add so much stuff because
Hmm.
I rather like take down the level of like furniture to like really special like bespoke pieces and then really cool like moments of art or artisans doing interesting things and like have that speak versus like filling a room to the rim of like stuff. Like here's a perfect example. Like there's a like one of our clients has like a dining room that we're developing. The dining room is like has a big picture like window. And then like in the meeting with the landscape architect, the um the landscape architect, the architect and myself, they were like the landscape architect was like, oh, like we can make this area really beautiful. Like so when you look out the dining room, because you're gonna have the full window or a full like pane of glass. He's like, I can really make it beautiful here. And then he was like, you could even do a sculpture. And then I was like, okay, you guys, if we do that, like I think that's actually a fantastic idea to experience that. So I think like yes, if there's like planting around like this sculpture and like gravel to get it, and then we have like a light shine on that really beautifully, but like hidden in the architecture, the exterior architecture. And then when we do the dining table, let's not do a pendant over the dining table. We'll do also architectural lighting so that when you like experience the dining table, the dining chairs, you're just taking on this like horizontal length and you
Mm.
hit like you go outside to the sculpture that's lit up. So you don't have these like bouncing visual eye movements.
Hmm.
You just have like this focused moment on the sculpture and the garden outside. And then you have like soft lighting over the dining table without doing like a lower
Mm-hmm.
chandelier. And
Mm-hmm.
so just like it was like way cooler that we had that conversation and we're like all on the same page. Like that's the beauty of like having all these different trades on the project.
Was
Yeah,
the
that's
client
awesome.
receptive to not having a giant chandelier? Or
They're
was
like,
it?
"Oh, I love that."
That's
Yeah.
cool. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Because the client had like their home is near here. I'm in Marin. Their home is in Marin. And so they were like, they actually like Baragon and like
Hmm.
Arado, and they were like, oh, we they like less,
Mm-hmm.
so they like that, and like you'll see in all those people's designs, they don't have like a lot of overhead lighting. That's like extra on you. It's like extra. It's too
Mm-hmm.
much.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. I mean, I like the level of integration in terms of the working relationships is important, but then also like for the homes and the objects and the furniture themselves, like you're describing. I really like what you said a few moments ago about like sometimes wishing there was less furniture and less decor and less items, and sometimes you that higher amount of stuff is required when the architecture is not at the level it could be, or the architect and the designer weren't on the same page, or the house we've seen
Different
a lot of
time
times is
frames.
shit and you can't there's not much you can do with it until in terms of the architecture unless you're going to like really change it, and it takes a lot more like the furniture and decor and FF&E takes has to put a lot more effort into its own work to try and make the space be decent.
Totally, and that's that, and I know that's like a thing that's like like clients who can afford it, but I think there is a whole like grouping of clients that can afford it and still don't do that. Do you
I
know what I
agree.
mean?
I
So
agree.
I feel like the clients that can afford that reality, I think it's just like they should lean in and do this because like it's just way more thoughtful and way more like it's gentler, like it's
Mm-hmm.
like softer. It's like I honestly I don't like consumption and consumerism, and I don't like, I mean, it's part of the whole studio head ethos. It's like we like very much focus on like the artisans that we work with. We have that Northern California Journal where we go and interview like different artists that we work with and artisans or gallerists that have like really intentional ways of even how they exist on the planet and like how they like what materials they work with. And like I think when you have more in depth with like certain pieces that you do have, you need less of it. Do you
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? Like you have
Mm-hmm.
more like you're like, oh, that like that sculpture is so beautiful, or the way we created this passageway with that artisan is so beautiful. And like you just need that moment and you don't need to like it's just like having too much noise in your life. It's
Mm-hmm.
like the more noise in your life, probably the less meaningful the things coming in are, or like the less you can pick and point the meaningful things. Whereas it's the same thing with interiors. Like you can, like like I, I don't want to say bad thing, but like I can see so many interior design projects where it's like, oh, you look and you're like, oh, well, that's a full interior design project, and like they filled the house with stuff, and like,
Mm-hmm.
oh wow, it looks, and then you zoom in and you're like, nothing is like special.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also, or the other aspect of it is they filled it with so many things. And I'm like, how sad that that special piece, because I know who that's from, is just like cluttered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It like
Yeah.
has no room to breathe. I can't believe they just like shoved it with everything else. Like they just like, and has no like, like any reverence for it or any respect for it, which I sometimes I like that energy, but not when it's cluttered with a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Like I like
Yeah. It's like
you
an I
guys.
Spy book. Like,
Yeah,
can you find this thing? Oh, yeah, there's a lot of stuff in there. I mean,
totally.
I really like what you're saying, and I think like it's a sort of a zoomed out vision of design and what you're trying to create, which is like a meaningful experience for someone to live within. And when things are working together, like the architecture, the interiors, like you're talking about, if it's done right, it's much more,
It's more
I guess,
powerful.
sensitive in
Yeah,
a
yeah.
way.
And I think also as a
Totally.
user, like you appreciate each piece much more if it's intentionally selected or designed, rather than like the cluttered aspect of some of those homes. Like, how are you gonna give love to every single thing that's in this space? There's just too much of it, right? You're gonna give like 1% of love to this chair and 0.5% to this painting on the wall, right? Rather than just maybe being more selective and more careful.
Totally. And I like, even like to the listeners who are not familiar with like Studio Ahead or what we do, like I also want to say, like, we're not pretentious. Like, it's not like I know some of this can sound like, oh, like, it can sound like that, but it's not. It's like, even if you look at our work, there's a lot of playfulness in it and like joy in it and softness in it. And it's like, can be silly, and it can be like, even that can be like, you can still be present in that reality too. Versus like sometimes I see interiors that are like, so like, you're happy. And it's like, okay, I am.
I'm frightened.
Like, yeah, I'm like, got it. I'm happy. Like, I get it. Like it's like, but it's like, you can still be like subtle and soft and still be playful and joyful and like, or you could be really curated. Like, it doesn't have to be like one way or the other, but just like, yes, when it's too much stuff, I feel like it's like, also, you're just like using way too many resources from planet Earth. Like, not to sound like a total, like, that's my UC Davis co-op side.
Yeah.
But that's like, just like, stop. You don't need to use that many resources.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I sound crazy. But yeah.
Well, I think it's about having all the design team and professionals on the same page as to what you're trying to achieve and how do you get there. And there's no need to be extraneous with stuff. You can create high quality things while being conscious about all the things you're talking about. And I think a lot of designers and architects would argue that it leads to a higher quality product and living experience anyway. It's just, it does require the right team. It requires people to have their heads on straight, in my view, and for everyone to have conversations. I think it's unfortunate that, and maybe you've seen this, that fairly often architects, let's say, and interior designers, they don't talk to each other, and then we get to these places where houses or other types of buildings, clearly there's some kind of mismatch, and it's unfortunate because they're all tied together, and it's like, why didn't you guys? And sometimes they weren't both present, as was kind of clients to blame, but it's like, why didn't you guys have a conversation? Because you're not helping yourself, and you're not helping them either. Like, it's just a lose-lose, I feel.
Totally. And I feel like this is something we haven't like touched on, but I want to make sure, like, something about like communication and conversation. Like, we have a major process with our, like, not major, but like a nice process with our clients that like also informs like the architectural team. And that's what I was describing with that architect who was like, oh, I like that process. Let's do that. Like, we do a process with our clients where we admit, I always tell clients, I was like, even if they are a friend, I'm like, I don't know you, and I know aspects of you, but I don't know how you like to exist. I don't know like how you like to like what makes you feel like whole, or like what all these things are. And so we always ask clients, don't zoom in on the physical yet.
Mm-hmm.
Like always, let's zoom out. Let's I'll go do a walkthrough of the house and just kind of hear their needs. I don't give any ideas. I don't give like anything. I just walk through and listen. And then I come back to the office and create like a questionnaire. And like the questionnaire goes like, it has some questions that are just like always happening in the questionnaires. And then other questions that are very specific to like the space we just walked and the needs they have or the thoughts they've brought up. And like having questions like, how do you like to sit? Like, do you like to like sit on the floor? Do you like to sit upright? Do you like to sit like laying on a sofa with two people being able to cuddle? Like, asking these questions like gives the design so much more like depth. And then like going into less specific questions and asking questions, or like more conceptual, be like, what movie directors do you like to watch? What moments in philosophy do you relate to? What moments in history do you relate to? Like, what artists are you following?
Mm-hmm.
What fashion brands do you engage with? And like asking all these questions just so like, and then from that, and I usually ask for the partners to answer them separately, because
Mm-hmm.
usually two people have two different concepts of reality. And like, even though they might think they're aligned, that'll give us like a good indicator of like, what each person feels individually. And then we ask like included with that questionnaire, please send like 5 images. Just send 5 images. I don't want like a whole 300 Pinterest board because then you've gone so deep in the physical realm
Hmm.
that you kind of your brain is stuck in that. So like if give us 5 inspiration images each, and they can be interiors, they can be artists, they can be whatever you want them to be. And then after that, we review the questions like internally as a team. And then we review like the inspiration images, which is like usually around 10 to 20. And then we like spend time and we start pulling from like inspiration images from books, from like artists. We go to like artist pages and like take like pull like the processes that they have in some of them so we can like educate. And then we go back to the clients and do like an inspiration image review of like 200 to 300 images. And we play a game of love, like, and veto. And the clients will like say what they love, what they like. And veto is just something I've learned to like keep the peace. That's actually what I learned at the co-ops because it was like communal voting. But like veto is like when you do thumbs down, it means
Hmm.
like someone doesn't engage with this at all and just like let's move on.
Hmm.
And so like even in interiors, we don't like clients to like over index on what like another person doesn't like because there's plenty of things we want to focus on what you love and what you like
Yeah.
and just like bring that energy forward. So and then after that, that's when we start developing like the furniture floor plans. That's when we start developing the elevations. And then that like gives like you kind of like the client feels like heard. So by
Hmm.
the time that you're creating that like those concepts and they like know you understand them verbally and you understand them visually. And then us as like designers, we feel so much more comfortable because we know the clients better at this point and we're designing for things that they've already opted into.
Yeah, that makes total sense. That's amazing to hear, and it's interesting because obviously we talked to a lot of architects on the show, and a lot of them have in broad scope, broad gesture, a similar kind of process. Like the importance of that initial research, the questionnaire, which is always formulated different depending on who the designer is, and the questions are different, but there's something about the richness of that research and getting to know the individual that seems to be one of the staples of good design. And all the professionals we respect, they're all like, yeah, we have to do that. We can't jump into, like, I like what you said. If you're doing a walkthrough, you're talking, you don't necessarily, or maybe you said you just don't give ideas. It's not the time for that. It's not the purpose of the walkthrough.
Totally. And if you, what I've seen is like, yes, I can give ideas and they can really relate to it. Or you could give ideas and it can like you don't want to shift it because they don't know you also.
Yeah.
So they don't want it to feel like you're pushy or you're intense or like whatever. They also want like at that point you're creating the cadence of like, oh, this is like communication and you're creating the cadence of like, I'm not just gonna throw ideas out there that like have no relation to you as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
Like because that's my own relation of how I would want to exist. Like I am fine with like my bed floating in the middle of the room. I am fine with like I like experiencing like my experience from the bathroom to like the bedroom this way. I want to know what how other people will want to experience it because we're designing for them.
Do you ever have a moment where, or a situation where the client's like, yeah, that sounds good, but really, I want to hear some ideas. Like, what are your ideas? Because, most often when the client has the first meeting, they're super excited and they want to go. They're like, come on, but give me some of the good stuff. I'm excited.
That's a red flag for me.
Interesting.
That's always like I like something I didn't mention for like the like about like meeting people. Also, I think when you get older, you start seeing the red flags.
Hmm.
And like when someone's really pushy like that, and I've explained the process and they don't find it like magic or beautiful, that's when I'm like, like, you're gonna be a tricky person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
you're not patient or
Yeah.
you're not like I just articulated why I don't do that, and then you're asking for it, and people usually don't.
Hmm.
People won't.
Yeah.
Like people won't. I'll say like while we're in a room, I'll be like, I'm gonna ask you questions in the questionnaire to understand how you like to sleep. Like, would you be open to sleeping in the middle of the room? would you be open? But it's more like that versus me being like, oh, you guys should like sleep
Hmm.
here and do this, and like you should like all of the furniture should be on the floor. Like I don't like that. Like no, there's a you always gotta have like. I mean, I think we've gotten to a point where like I can kind of see the red flags of like, oh, this person is just a little bit different. And I don't think we take on clients like that.
Yeah.
Like I think we avoid that situation because then it's just like not fun for anyone involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And these are long processes too.
Exactly.
We're running out of time. My final question. Do you have a question?
Well, one of my
Yeah.
my final question would be, what is next for you guys? What should we be looking for 2023?
Yeah.
Big gatherings finally, as predicted 3 years
Yeah,
ago.
I'm gonna go back in the event industry. That made a lot of money. No, the like thing that both Elena and I are super excited about in our whole team, there's like three different layers. It's like one layer, I really love our team and we're really growing, and it's like really exciting to see like senior designers develop into their own and like learn the ethos of Studio Ahead, but like get it. Like I asked them to get excited as well with like projects and like artists and artisans they want to use. And like seeing that develop and just actually being like a really well, like a grounded team in a way. Um, that's exciting. The second thing that's exciting is like our furniture collection. We're always excited. It's like, and I hate to say furniture collection because it sounds like that's such a specific mentality, but like
Hmm.
it's more like we create furniture when we're like get inspired. So like we don't, it's not like, oh, we've come up with like 10 products and here we go.
Right.
It's like, oh, let's make a bed. You know what I mean? And we like think about the bed and how we want to make it. We think about the dining, like a dining chair, and like in it, a lot of it comes up in situations for clients when we're like, why is it really hard to find like a sculptural like fully upholstered dining chair? Like, why is that like impossible? It's like really sometimes it's out of inspiration, sometimes it's out of pain points of like trying to source something. And then the third thing that I'm like, so like we're so excited about is like doing, so we like you guys, I've sent it to you guys, but from January 18th to February 18th, we're doing like an exhibition, like a art exhibition with that we co-curated with Moria Nelson, who's the director of the Blanc Space and the Blanc Estate, and she's the daughter of J.B. Blanc. And we're doing an exhibition with her to celebrate. We received the Architectural Digest New American Voices, and we were like, how can we celebrate this? And we were like, well, let's like make a version of our journal like alive. And so, and Morai was a huge aspect of like introducing us to like Ito Yoshimoto and like a lot of the characters that we like to use in our projects. So like that's like for us, that's like such a like cool moment to be able to like curate something like that. And it's going to be on like a really good level. Like the artists we're using, Ito Yoshimoto, like contemporary artists like Ito Yoshimoto, Jesse Schlesinger, Evan Shively, Madeline Fitzpatrick, Tyler and Kyle. And then like legacy, like Hugh Ceramics is going to be a part of it. Gordon Onslow Ford, who's amazing, that I don't think people really know about, that we're like really obsessed with. And of course, JB Blanc, like pieces from JB Blanc, and doing things like that. Like now we're so excited. We want to bring more of those cultural aspects to San Francisco, because one of our things, like Elena and I, when we were like interior designers working for another firm in San Francisco, we're like, why are there not like a lot of cultural things here that like focus on? There are. I shouldn't say that.
No, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
we get what you're saying.
Yeah. But it's like doing that type of energy. And so like we talked to this place called the Jones Institute, which is a woman who like has really created like this whole energy, because she started like in the front part of her house doing like exhibitions, and now she has a little space in Minnesota Street Project, and she's just really cool and awesome. And we're like, hey, we like discussed, we went to dinner together, and I was like, we discussed like, why don't we do something with you in September? So like we want to keep this like exhibition energy of like bringing artisans and artists like forward.
That's amazing. Yeah, let's bring some life into the city with design and curation.
Totally.
Some fresh blood.
Yeah. Totally. And it's out there. It's out there.
Yeah, right? Like I guess it just needs a sort of a platform or something like you guys are doing to have it coalesce.
Bring it to light, yeah.
Homan, this was amazing. Thank you so much. We went past the 2-hour mark as I kind of expected it was going to happen, but thank you so much. We appreciate it. And happy Tuesday. What is it, Tuesday?
It is Tuesday.
I think it is Tuesday.
It is Tuesday. You guys are awesome. I had a great time when we went out to dinner that time, and I had a great time now. You guys make people very comfortable.
Oh, thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching this video on YouTube. If you like what we're doing, then please support our show by hitting that subscribe button and liking and commenting on our videos.
You can also find us on most of the social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're mostly on Instagram. And you can reach out to the hotline, 213-222-6950. You can send a text message or leave a voicemail if you have any reaction to this recording, any questions you might have, or guest suggestion. Feel free to send it our way.
Cool. Thank you for watching and see you next week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.